Oh, hello everyone, and welcome to Wine, Women, and Words. I should probably silence my cell phone. So give me one moment here, because I am not a prepared host tonight, because as you can tell, it is just me and our guest. Michelle will hopefully be joining us later. She's caught up with school, because she's actually a good human and doesn't cut class like I used to always do. Anyways, joining us tonight is Mia Hopkins. She is the author of the book Thirst. I promise you guys I'll get my act together tonight. Thank you so much for joining us, Mia.
I have a prop. Oh, wait, can you see it?
Oh, it is a book. Oh, no, that's an audiobook.
The audiobook, I'm really excited because the book is available in digital only, but my agent just sent me a box of these as a surprise. So this is the, what is this? The MP3 audio.
Ooh. So where can we find that MP3 audio?
Yeah, so it's available on CD and on Audible. So yeah.
Wonderful. And if you guys need an Audible subscription, go to our website, winewomenwordspodcast.com. If you go to our bookstore, we have a page there called the bookstore. And at the bottom, there is a place where you can go get an Audible subscription. And click on that, you can get 2 books free. So you can get Thirst as one of your free books.
That's right.
Yay. And speaking of other stuff with Mia, what are you drinking tonight? I know you're abstaining from the alcohol, but, you know, we're equal opportunity people, so we will not judge you.
Thank you. I'm 8 months pregnant, so it's been a long time since I've been able to enjoy a beer or a wine, and I'm very sad about that. So I'm drinking decaf green tea, which is a party in a mug.
It sounds like a party in a mug.
I could lie and say that it was alcoholic and then just like slowly pretend to be more and more inebriated as we talk, if you'd like.
That could work. Well, I can save you from that as well, and I'll just drink for 2 tonight. I'm a giver. I will do that.
Yay.
I'm actually drinking Outer Sands. It's a Sauvignon Blanc, and it is another one of our wines that you can get through Wink. And go to our website, or I'm sorry, go to trywink.com/www podcast, and you can get $22 off of your first order of wine. They have a really great program coming up, the Summer of Rosé, and you can get a wine every month. You could skip a month. You can keep going with the wine, however you'd like to work it. And it's really fun. They have a great quiz for you guys to try out and check it out. So that's trywink.com/www podcast. Go there, get $22 off your first bottle of wine or your first order of wine, and you can thank me about it later. And eventually I will get my act together for the show. It's like missing an arm not having Michelle on the show with me. It is so weird. So, moving on. We'll let Mia talk, because I'm sure Mia has her shit together more than I do tonight. We're going to talk about her book, Thirsty. And it tells a story which... we'll read here, Contemporary Romance Thirsty, which launches the East Side Brewery trilogy. Thirsty tells a story of a Latino gangster-turned-brewer in East Los Angeles who finds love and redemption. And I don't know if you have anything more that you want to add on to your description of your book.
Sure. So Thirsty is the first in this trilogy called East Side Brewery. And it's a contemporary romance. It's got a lot of steam, so I write really sexy romance, and this is no exception. It's different from my other books in that it's written from the hero's point of view. The entire book is in first-person point of view, so that's a first for me. And I think that it was like when I started writing Sal, what's the name of the hero of the book? When I started writing him, I was intending to do dual POV with the heroine, but he just wouldn't stop talking inside my head. So I just kept going. So it was like, First chapter, okay, Sal's still talking. Second chapter, Sal's still talking. So that's how I made the decision, is that I didn't want to interrupt him. It felt rude. So it's a, yeah, so it's a first person point of view romance. And I spent some time in East LA. I worked there for a long time. I volunteered in the area also. And I'm an LA native. And so I wanted to set a story in one of the neighborhoods that I know and that I love. And so East LA, and specifically the Boyle Heights area, is where
Okay.
this set.
Yay, LA. I'm over in LA too,
Yeah.
so we're practically neighbors.
Well, I'm living in Mid City now, so
Okay.
it's right in, smack in the middle, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say so. And I mean, I love it when East LA and the Boyle Heights area and that region, they when they get some love, when it's not a situation. I mean, because there is, we do have crime. It is LA. It's a big city. But looking at it from another perspective, because he's a reform gangster, am I correct?
Right. He's in the process of reforming. So he is an ex-con, and he is formerly incarcerated. He was in prison for 5 years. And the character at the start of the book has been out of prison for a few months and is having trouble just kind of getting housing, I think is one of the challenges. The place where I volunteered was a gang intervention program. I was there for about 2 years. And one of the things that I did was I wrote for the website, I wrote for the blog, and I interviewed trainees who are in the program. And, people were generous enough to tell me their stories and to share their different experiences. So I've sat with former gang members for hours and hours and hours, hearing stories. And so one of the biggest challenges is finding like stable housing and being able to make a living wage when you have convictions on your record. So that's where we're starting with the book. He is really, really trying to stay away from his gang and really trying to earn enough money to support himself and his brother, who's soon coming out of prison. And it's a challenge. Every day is a slog. So for me, the stories that I heard, they were really heroic stories in a different kind of way than I was accustomed to. I mean, they're everyday challenges that other people take for granted. Being able to, for a lot of the people that I interviewed, for example, they don't have driver's licenses. They were taken away because of their convictions and different run-ins with the law. So a lot of times they have to be on public transportation. They can't get a job in their neighborhood. They have to travel, really far across the county, but then they're on parole, so they can't leave the county. It's really like a complicated situation. And I wouldn't have understood it if I hadn't had the opportunity to listen to the story. So that's where the story starts.
And that's a really great place for a story to start, truly, especially when you have a hero. Because, I mean, he really does truly have a hero's journey where he's got to go from this awful place to becoming a regular, proper member of society. And one thing that you and I touched on before we went live on the show was that people like to crap on romance genres. They like to dismiss it as not being legitimate literature, which, I mean, obviously you're going to say that it's legitimate literature because, you wrote it. And readers...
I don't know. That's like a strike against it.
I certainly don't mean it that way. But I mean, you're not, it's any book that's out there is legitimate literature. You put work into it. It's, readable text. Trust me, guys, it is readable text. And it's good. It is good. So definitely check it out, especially through the Audible, as we mentioned earlier. But it's romance novels, I'm finding they're willing to tackle some of the stuff that we're not able and willing to tackle in regular society. Like previously we had Holly on to talk about her books, like Choosing Hope, that talked about, was very much a kind of a moral story of what happens when you go, leaving your husband for selfish reasons and the breakup of a marriage, and you've got this romance in there. And then you also have a story like Thirsty here, where you have actual situations where, you have somebody with a criminal record who's trying to get out there in society, and through fiction, you get to feel as well as learn these situations.
Yeah.
You see, yeah, perspective, you get to feel what it's like for him, and you get to encounter these problems that are actually real in society. And the romance adding to it, it's like a spoonful of sugar making that medicine go down.
Oh, I like that. Yeah, that's a really nice way of putting it. For this particular book, it's also unusual for me because I took it a little grittier than I usually
Mm-hmm.
write. The past books that I've published, I've written a cowboy series, so
Mm-hmm.
it takes place in the Central Valley. It's a lot lighter than this and a lot more small town kind of romance.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted something that was close to home, and I think the thing with we were also talking about this before we went live, was that I haven't always been a romance reader. So
Mm-hmm.
I was a literary fiction reader. I was kind of snobby and like one of the people who really was down on genre fiction for no reason except that my professors were and I wanted to be like them. But
Mm-hmm.
I actually picked up a romance novel. And so when I did, I felt like you pick up books. For example, I read erotica and I read like the very serious, like super downer kinds of books that I was supposed to read. And like they did stimulate my brain,
Mm-hmm.
but I was looking for something that also kind of touched the heart a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I found that with romance, and have been kind of a big fan of the genre ever since. And actually, it gave me a new career. So it does help to deliver the medicine with a spoonful of sugar for sure.
Yes, and people are probably never going to look at Mary Poppins the same way again.
Well,
You're
no,
welcome.
Dick was kind of a hottie, you know.
Yeah, he was. I am glad I'm not the only one who thinks that. He had
Yeah.
that geeky cuteness about him.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Definite romance hero material. So
Yes.
sweet romance. That's the next trend. You heard it here first.
It's it. Wine, Women, and Words. We are breaking news, giving you the exclusives that you can't get anywhere else. That's why you've got to come back and keep watching and listening. Because not to toot our own horn, we're kind of awesome. Um, so, as you said, you're from the area of East LA. You're familiar with that. Um, Tell us what about the brewery, this historic brewery, the lost history of LA's East Side Beer Brewery. What's the curious about that? Obviously.
Sure. I I grew up in Huntington Park, which is kind of like southeast LA.
Mm-hmm.
And then when before I started writing romance, I was a teacher and I taught for 13 years in different schools in LA. I started my teaching career in Boyle Heights, and it's a great historic community. And
Mm-hmm.
for probably its entire existence, has been this wonderful gateway for different immigrant communities to get
Mm-hmm.
established. And it's an old neighborhood. I mean, like layers and layers of history. Um, it's changing now for it's a big controversy. There's a lot of gentrification in Boyle
Mm-hmm.
Heights, and for to research the book, was I made it a point to visit a couple of the smaller breweries that have opened in the neighborhood,
Mm-hmm.
and they're startups and they're really plucky, but you can see that this kind of like historically working class single family home neighborhood is changing. Housing prices are becoming more and more inaccessible for longtime residents. You can see coffee shops and galleries are opening. It's the same story in a lot of neighborhoods in the
Mm-hmm.
United States, and it's definitely a battleground in Boyle Heights. Um, when I was going through the history of Boyle Heights and East LA, I was curious to know more about LA's beer history and
Mm-hmm.
brewing. I wondered, if we were such a large city, how come we didn't have our own like Anheuser-Busch like that started here? And the truth is we did. We did have one. And it was called East Side Beer. And
Hmm.
so I did a little bit of research when I first started writing the book. There was a big brewery. It's off the 5 freeway. It's still, the building's still there. It's the brewery. It's an arts
Yeah,
complex now.
I've seen that. Yeah.
So it was a working brewery, and it was independent for a really long time. It was founded by German brewers, just like the larger beer companies in the United States. And it's, I'm trying to remember when it was bought. It was eventually bought by Pabst Blue Ribbon
Mhm.
and slowly phased out the beers. But on opening day at Dodger Stadium, it was Eastside beer that was served at the stadium. So
How
we had our own homegrown beer. Like,
neat.
so cool. Um, I remember like my family's from the Philippines. They came to Los Angeles in like the early 70s,
Mhm.
and dad used to work downtown for the school district, and he used to run away from work at lunch hour and play hooky and go to the East Side Brewery to drink. So I showed him research, and he's like, "Oh, I know that place." So he pick up my uncle and then go and drink a beer in the middle of the day and have lunch at the East Side Brewery, which is just really funny to me. So just looking at that history was really interesting, and I decided to steal the name for my series.
Mm.
Yeah.
And that's great. And it's great to, as I mentioned before, I'm the historical fiction nut. So I see something with history and I'm like, ooh, we got to pull it out. I got to see and explore this more. Because, yeah, Boyle Heights, you bring up Boyle Heights and it's starting to come up more and more in literature in general. I just read and reviewed The Magnificent Esme Wells.
I saw
And
that.
yeah, Boyle Heights comes up in that book quite a bit. She talks about the Jewish community that's there. I've looked at setting stories in Boyle Heights because for a while the Italian community was there. So it's like the stepping stone of immigrant communities. And of course it's Los Angeles, so everything's changing so fast
Mm-hmm.
that we just, it just turns over so much. And yeah, the fact that we had the brewery now was the change out to Pabst, do you know if it was before the Prohibition or after the Prohibition?
I believe it was after, and I think that was one of the things that caused the original owners to have difficulty running the brewery. I think
Mm-hmm.
they're having trouble competing after Prohibition. I didn't know that there's San Antonio Winery. Have you ever been there?
Yeah, San Antonio Winery is interesting because that one actually started before Prohibition. It was started by Italian immigrants, straight to Los Angeles. And they were actually able to survive because they had to deal with the Catholic Church to produce communion wine. That's what saved a lot of vineyards
That is
and
so
throughout the country. Yeah, they produced communion wine, so they got the okay on it. And then a lot of the grape producers in California and other areas, they did something actually kind of ingenious. They produced a grape brick. Now, what this brick was, it was a brick of compressed grapes, and you would get it as a package to make grape juice. And they would tell you, do not leave it in the sun. Do not leave it in heat. This will cause fermentation, so you shouldn't be doing this. And so that's how they were able.
Whatever you do, do not.
Do not turn this into alcohol, whatever you do. So, yeah. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. So that's how they were able to survive because we had the San Antonio Winery, if I'm not mistaken, is one of the few that survived Prohibition. We had a lot more pre-Prohibition, and it killed off a lot of the businesses during those dark ages. Because, yes, here at Wine Women Words, we consider Prohibition to be the dark ages.
Very dark.
Very dark ages. And so, yeah, it killed off, a lot of those businesses and obviously turned things to crime. So, yeah, the history of alcohol here with Mia at Wine Women and Words. With the story, I mean, obviously beer takes a central role in, or a role in the story? And because you were mentioning that you were looking at some of the beer stuff. Have you do you have a bit of an expertise in it? Is this something that you learned working and being in East LA, or?
Not really. No, it's just I like drinking it. That's it. And was reading about, how craft breweries are, often given um, facilities in parts of town that are at first not desirable and become like these bellwethers of development
Mhm.
and gentrification. And I kind of saw that happening a little bit in
Mhm.
East LA. Um, it's, it's kind of a double-edged sword because I like craft breweries a lot. It's like
Mhm.
there's such great places to go, and a lot of them are family friendly and dog
Mhm.
friendly, and
Yeah.
it's a lot more of a relaxed environment than a regular dive bar. And I think they're really good for building community and becoming like these kind of community centers. And so for me, that's a good thing.
Mhm.
And when I think about gentrification, I think about outsiders coming into a community and starting businesses and kind of like taking over aspects of the culture that they didn't have control over before.
Mhm.
For Thirsty, I was wondering what would happen if a family that was from the neighborhood started a craft brewery in the neighborhood. So it was
Mhm.
of the neighborhood rather than started by an outsider. And
Mhm.
so kind of the heart of Thirsty.
Mhm.
um, Sal goes from working like very menial jobs to connecting with somebody who has a brewery,
Mhm.
and they become friends, and that man becomes a mentor to him.
Mhm.
And so over the course of $3, the family is going to open different phases of the brewery. So Sal is the brewmaster. He's going to learn how to make the beer. And
Mhm.
then the second brother is going to kind of like secure the plant, like secure the like location for this beer in the middle of this kind of like neighborhood that's in transition. And
Mhm.
then the third book is the third brother who's going to take their company to the top. So one, two, three. I needed all three brothers to be able to do this. And it becomes a family business. Them and their love interest, since I'm writing romance. So it,
Yes,
it,
we
it
gotta have the love interest involved, and it's always nice because I mean I like my books with a little bit of romance, minimal. There's got to be some little bit of a romantic element, because it really just tugs at your heartstrings even more. Um, so yeah, and that's and I had a question and I had a thought and it just slipped my mind.
well, I
Um,
feel like even people who are like critical of romance, whatever genre they read, they often like to have a romantic subplot.
mhm,
It's something that rounds out a story, even though
mhm.
people don't say that they like romance, like they kind of do.
Yeah, it's like our book of the month is The Phantom's Apprentice. Now it's not a full-on romance, but there is a bit of a romance plot to it. Just not necessarily your traditional one. I mean, and you see it in like the historical fiction realms, and just a little bit in there. We like our romance. Admit it, guys. It's okay. We will
Okay.
not judge you for liking romance.
Won't judge you at all.
Yeah, this is a judgment-free zone. You can like just about. There are some lines that we will draw, but you can like just about any kind of book you like. And if you give me a good enough reason why you like a certain book, I will cease my judgment. But
It's
yeah,
very
yeah.
interesting.
I mean, we try
I
as
feel
long
like
as you're reading. That's the important thing. You gotta be reading.
very important.
Yes. Um, And so I love the fact that, the gentrification pulls in so much because, like we said, spoonful of sugar and all that. And because, you're seeing it, like I work a lot in Santa Ana, with Santa Ana. So you have those gentrification issues. And I know the people that work within like the city areas, they try to be very careful about the gentrification
Mhm.
issues. And at least in Santa Ana, it's a lot of local people who are also starting businesses.
Right.
And I know where I am. You said the craft brewery thing, and red flags went off. Like, oh my gosh, am I going to get gentrification here because we're getting a craft brewery now?
Ooh.
I know. After the baby, you'll have to come back down and visit me, and we'll go to the go to the craft brewery together.
No problem. I'll wheel her in.
Yeah, I mean, family friendly event stuff, no judgment. As long as you're not putting the beer in the bottle, I think you'll
Yeah,
be okay.
exactly. Yeah,
So you
it's
can,
it's something that I love about craft breweries is that it seems to be a really welcoming environment and
mhm,
just a comfortable place to go after
mhm,
work, for example, and have a beer or two with the friends. I think it's really it's a strong point of craft breweries is that
mhm.
we have these like giant corporations and you can get your beer anywhere really, but you can't really get that sense of community anywhere else. So
Yeah. There was one that I used to go to in Texas, and they would do, I want to say it was like Sunday afternoons, they would do a movie. And they would do like B movies. Like that was the first time I saw Santa versus the Martians. And let me tell you, you need a beer in hand for if you're watching. But yeah, kids would come and people would bring their own food, so there'd be a picnic, but there would be the beer there. You had to bring your own glass. That was a requirement. But yeah, people would just hang out and talk and watch the movie together and get together off the phones, off technology,
away
which
from
is
the screen.
wonderful.
Yeah, it's great.
Yes, I mean, as much as I love technology because it gets to, I get to meet wonderful people like Mia here and we get to see each other. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been able to see or know each other. It's also nice to get out from away from the electronics and being able to interact with people one on one. And so, yeah, craft breweries, little wineries are able to do that.
Mhm.
Um, so, alcohol brings people together, guys. It brings us
Being
together.
responsible. Yeah.
Yes, responsible drinking brings people together. Sometimes irresponsible drinking brings
People too
families
close
together and
together.
helps. Yeah. And here we are in the point where we just kind of divulge
Yeah. Well,
into
it's romance, so
it is true. It is true. I mean, heck, how many children's stories people can say their life began because mom drank too much wine? It is a romance of some sort.
exactly.
And one thing that we haven't talked about yet was the Latino lead and having representation in literature, which representation I'm always big on. We got to have representation in literature. We have a diverse society. We should have diverse characters. And what was one of the reasons besides culture? Because I mean, really, you're looking at Boyle Heights, as we discussed, you could pretty much have just about everybody from the immigrant community there. What was your drive for having a Latino there? Besides, I'm assuming the Latino lover, which let's not lie, ladies. We've all had that fantasy.
It's I wanted to write about a community, so it made sense for Sal to be Mexican American, and
Mm-hmm.
it made sense for his Vanessa, his love interest, to be the same. Um, I grew up in Huntington Park, which is 98% Latino, and so it was like the one Asian kid in my school. It's just I grew up kind of inundated um, in Mexican American culture and Mexican, and I had maybe like one or two Cuban friends, and that was it. So it's just something that I grew up around the families. I grew up around the language. I grew up around kind of like the small cultural things that you see in the book. It's not something that I had to um, like manufacture, I guess. It's just something that I know from when I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but I am not Mexican and I don't have that background, like personally. So I, throughout writing this book, you're afraid of inappropriate, kind of like appropriation, of
Mm-hmm.
respectful, of buying into stereotypes without realizing it or capitalizing on stereotypes. Like Sal's a gangster, like that's a hard sell. For a romance hero, it's not easy. But one of the things that was important for me is to tell the story of a whole person. And so, in the media, traditionally you would see a Latino male portrayed as a gangster. You kind of roll your eyes, of course, it's going to be a
Mm-hmm.
gangster. Like, where are our doctors? Where are our lawyers?
Mm-hmm.
just because that is something you've seen before, it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't mean that his story doesn't deserve to be told with
Mm-hmm.
respect.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to create a character who, like at first glance is kind of like, oh, it's another Mexican gangster. She's gonna get this totally wrong. I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to give him a lot of depth, and I wanted to give him dignity. And it was something that I was constantly aware of while I was writing this book. Like, be as respectful as you can. Make sure that you're aware of what you're doing with every single sentence that you're writing. I had a lot of help to write this book. So I had sensitivity readers, I had friends.
Oh, I love sensitivity readers. I love the concept of sensitivity readers. I'm right now with my book, as many of the listeners and viewers know, I'm at the point of final editing. It's about to go out for pitching, and one way or another, it's going to be published next year, by the end of next year. So help me God. Because I feel like I always tell my husband, I feel like a woman in the 9th month of her trimester of her pregnancy. Like, okay, get this kid out of me. So help me God, I am done being pregnant. And I'm going to birth this thing. And I feel that way with my first book about Anita, where oh my God, I'm going to birth this thing. And that one deals with a lot with, because she's South American, so I deal a lot with the Latino South American community and stuff there. And I have a blueprint for that. But the second book, I'm actually creating a Black character in this Italian world in New Orleans. And before I even started put pen to paper on the first draft, I was like, okay, who am I gonna get for my sensitivity readers? Who am I gonna create for this? Because sensitivity readers are so important to be able to help kind of guide you. And
Right.
I'm glad you bring that up for you, that you use them for the book.
I'm sure I get a lot of things wrong and can't rely on one or two or even three sensitivity readers
Mm-hmm.
to kind of like absorb the shock when the book comes out and people say you got this totally wrong. Like, you have to own it if you got it
Mm-hmm.
wrong. But they help me with getting, cultural literacy right, making sure that I get, language right, making sure I get small things like food right.
Mm-hmm.
It's but it's a challenge because again, I'm not Mexican. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
like, it doesn't that I grew up in the neighborhood. It doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the only thing I can do is do my homework, do my research, be as respectful as possible, and when things go wrong, just to take it and say, okay, I made a mistake.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's a story that I wanted to tell. Um, I don't want to take the story away from another author.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, it's from the experiences that I had working in the gang intervention program, listening to stories, spending a lot of time in the neighborhood, having friends who are single parents. Like, it's something that came together because of the things that I experienced. But again, that's not my culture. So I always
Mm-hmm.
have to be aware of that.
And I think that's the key word that you put in there, was respect, having respect for the other culture. And I think one of the great things about this book is you're actually taking somebody who's in a crappy situation, and that can happen to anybody, regardless of their race,
Mm-hmm.
and pulling them out and showing how they can pull out of that situation and get into this better life and create a better life for themselves. And I think that's a really wonderful thing. And that in and of itself can be commendable. So yay, kudos for that.
Thank you. One of the requirements of the romance genre is the happy ever after. So I want to make sure that Sal and his brothers get their big, big, big happy ever after at the end
And
of every
that's a
book.
nice thing. Yeah. I mean, it's sometimes we don't always want those horror stories before we're tucked into bed. We want that the world isn't such a crappy place after all.
I mean, it's the full human experience. Like, not
Mm-hmm.
every book has to be a downer, and not every ending has to be like ambivalent to be meaningful.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes really nice things happen, really good things happen, and like sometimes the ending is a beginning, and that's part of the human condition. We need to, have literature that honors that as well. So
Mm-hmm.
that's why romance is where it's at for me.
And that's great. And I love having champions of romance, and I love championing. Guys, I'm sorry, I'm such a hot mess tonight. Um,
Thank you for you. It's okay.
Yes, that's right. I'm drinking for two. I am on the second glass, by the way, if anybody out there is keeping score. So we are just about at our half an hour. So I want to thank you so much, Mia. It was so great talking to you, and we'll have to have you come back. Um,
Thank you so much for having me. I think I was telling you earlier that I have done podcasts before, but they were romance podcasts. So it's nice to be able to talk to people who read widely in different genres and to talk about, to talk about romance and to talk about my. And yeah, it's really nice to be able to reach out. And good luck with your own book. My gosh, that's such an exciting time.
It is. It's exciting and terrifying, and want to pull my hair out with all my edits.
I have like bald patches from edits.
Yeah, there's a reason why my hair's in a ponytail right now, guys. But yeah, it's great. Thank you so much. And guys, pick up a copy of Thirst, and available digitally, so you can get it on Kindle.
Thirsty.
I'm sorry, I said Thirst. I keep saying Thirst.
It's okay. It's about Thirsty for sure.
Yes, there's a picture, and for those of you who are listening, it is Thirsty, and is available. You said digitally, so you can get it through Kindle, and you can also get it on through Audible. Again, go to our link on our website. Thank you so much, Mia, for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I had a really good time.
And remember, guys, keep drinking, keep reading, pick up a copy of Thirsty, and also to help keep you hydrated while you're reading, go to www.trywink.com/www podcast, because we can't have you getting dehydrated while you're reading the book, especially with a book named Thirsty. You can't get dehydrated. You have no excuse. All right, guys. Good night.
Good night.